Oh, boy. We really lucked out this time.
Mm-hmm. We most certainly did.
Oh, hey, come on.
Girls, don't go too far away. We're gonna eat soon.
Yeah, all right.
You happy?
Oh. How about some champagne? I should have known you'd have that covered.
Ooh.
Well, why don't you tell the twins it's time to eat, okay? Are you opening 2 bottles?
What's that, darling?
I thought I heard you open another bottle.
What another bottle?
That was the strangest echo.
What echo?
Never mind. Go call the girls, okay?
Okay. Girls! Let's go! Come on!
Wait a minute, where'd the chicken go?
I'm starving. I'm more starving than you are. No way.
Goodness gracious, you'd think you'd never seen food before. You okay, honey?
Yes. I guess so. It's the strangest thing.
You okay, honey?
You just asked me that.
You okay, honey?
Why do you keep saying that?
Saying what?
You keep asking me if I'm okay.
I only said it once.
No, you said it 3 times.
Here. I think you need this. A toast to our new house, my raise, and this beautiful and gorgeous day.
Hey, where's our drinks?
I'll get them for you. Drinks. 1 drinks. 2 drinks. Get them open. Come on. Let's have a toast.
Hey, where's our drinks?
I'll get them for you. Drinks. 1 drinks. Toast to our new house, my raise, and this beautiful and gorgeous day. Here. I think you need this. A toast to our new house, my raise, and this beautiful and gorgeous.
I wrote out these dreams in novel after novel, story after story. To name two in which this prior ugly present obtained most clearly, I cite The Man in the High Castle and my 1974 novel about the U.S. as a police state called Flow My Tears, the Policeman Said. I'm going to be very candid with you. I wrote both novels based on fragmentary residual memories of such a horrid slave state world. People claim to remember past lives. I claim to remember a different, very different present life. I know of no one who has ever made this claim before, but I rather suspect that my experience is not unique. What perhaps is unique is the fact that I am willing to talk about it. We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
A toast to our new house, my rays, and this beautiful day. I cannot believe I'd never seen this episode from The Twilight Zone in the 1980s until just the other day. But it's also very interesting. I'm not sure exactly when this episode came out, like what year in the 80s specifically, but it couldn't have been too long after the death of Philip K. Dick, who died, and I think in like 82, right before Blade Runner actually came out. I think it was the first movie. I can't believe it's been this long since I've even talked about Philip K. Dick and simulation theory. It feels like it's long overdue, and those of you who've been watching my channel for a long time, since the pre-COVID era, you will know that I talked about this stuff a lot early on. It was probably one of my favorite topics, and like so many of the things, it only feels that much more relevant today, particularly now that we're in the Epstein file age, whatever you want to call this, the Epstein drop, psyop, gaslighting paradigm. You know, where arguably society, more than it's ever been before, is now dealing with the mainstreaming. You know, you're at a weird moment in cultural history when Trump's announcing the alien files and everyone's just immediately seeing that as a distraction. Like, that doesn't even work. You've got competing narratives. You've got the alien files versus the Epstein files, and what a time to be alive. And particularly with everybody talking about Zionism, and you know, of course, there was that interview that Tucker just did with Huckabee that is getting a lot of attention, obviously. And so, for a number of reasons, I was reminded of a lot of things that I have talked about in the past that perhaps is probably totally new to a lot of people who've come in the past 5 years. So trying to figure out where to begin. But, you know, this whole implosion of reality kind of syndrome, this phenomenon of the conspiracy realm, where you're kind of waking up from the dream, waking up from the deception, from the illusion, from the matrix. You know, you can't talk about this stuff without talking about the matrix idea, isn't it amazing that the whole red pill, blue pill, talk about like seeding ideas into the public consciousness, into the mainstream zeitgeist, you know, to where red-pilled, that term being red-pilled is now so ubiquitous that it's you know, red-pilled, blue-pilled, black-pilled, white, you know, we have all the pills. And that, of course, goes back to the Matrix, and you can't talk about the Matrix without talking about simulation theory, the origins of simulation theory, which inevitably brings us back to Philip K. Dick.
Imagine opening your eyes and discovering that the world you know might not be real. That your memories, your friends, even your very identity could be part of a program, a simulation, or a dream designed by someone else. Philip K. Dick didn't just write about that possibility, he lived it. In his mind, reality was a mirror that constantly cracked, revealing glimpses of other worlds. For years, the writer was haunted by a feeling he couldn't ignore, the certainty that something or someone was manipulating reality. It wasn't paranoia, it was a revelation. In his visions, he saw symbols, encoded messages, hidden patterns woven into everyday life. An entity, an unknown intelligence, seemed to be communicating with him, showing him fragments of a truth the rest of us could not see. His work became a map to that invisible territory, a catalogue of parallel worlds, fractured identities, and minds trapped within false realities. But the more he wrote, the thinner the line grew between fiction and his own existence. What if the worlds he described in his novels weren't pure imagination, but memories leaking in from the other side? His legacy now stretches onward, warning those who dare to look. Blade Runner, Total Recall, Minority Report, The Man in the High Castle, all emerged from his obsession with a universe that might be programmed, edited, or simply wrong.
I mean, we're just inside a capsule. We're in a figment of God's imagination. This is a divine vibrational simulation. And what's really cool is quantum physics actually corroborates on this. Meaning this is what Kabbalists have always known for 1,000 years, but now with quantum physics, we now know everything is really vibrational. Everything's just moving vibrationally. This is a divine vibrational simulation.
It's amazing how with all this discussion of Israel and Zionism, and people are talking about the Talmud and, you know, the Star of Remphan, and there really is this kind of this massive explosion of people discussing what Judaism really teaches. They're questioning dispensationalist theology, Christian Zionism, Schofield, you know, Darby, all this stuff being discussed all over the place, right? And along with that is this whole topic of the Noahide laws, which I've kind of been delving into a lot more deeply than I did for many years, because I was more focused on the cosmology question, which bled into Kabbalah, right? Particularly as it relates to quantum physics, which we'll get back to. But recently, so since I've been kind of looking into the Noahide stuff, you know, more in the last few months, particularly following the work of people like Mike and Yana Ben-Nun. They've got Substacks and Israeli News Live. They've been around for a long time, but as former Zionists, and he's a Jewish guy, you know, he was born, you know, into a Jewish family, and they have a fascinating testimony. So they've been writing a lot about the Noahide stuff, but then also you have guys like, what's his name, Jeremy Sladen, J Slay USA. I've been kind of following some of the stuff on his channel. And I'm mentioning him specifically because I was listening to an interview that he did, I think it was like less than a year ago, with Deanne Loper, who I know from years back, right? The pre-COVID days, Deanne Loper, in her book, Kabbalah Secrets Christians Need to Know, an in-depth study of the kosher pig and the gods of Jewish mysticism. And I listened to this interview. I'll have it linked in the description. I'm going to have a bunch of links, as I usually try and link to everything that I'm referring to or playing. So definitely recommend this interview, but it reminded me of a lot of things, and so I wanted to kind of do a recap and talk about how I think there are some new twists. So it's not just going to be all review here, but we're going to cover a lot of ground. This is not going to be a short video, but I'll try not to make it crazy long. But who knows? This is very key, because as a lot of people are coming to understand, I mean, in some ways it's encouraging, right? That Christian Zionism is being exposed, and dispensationalism, which I have come out of myself, having grown up in a more or less a mainline evangelical kind of perspective. Even though the church I grew up in, they didn't really talk about Bible prophecy at all. They kind of tried to avoid the question. So it was kind of more through just the kind of generic Christian bookstore subculture, where they sold all those Timothy LaHaye books. And it wasn't through my own specific church per se, but it was just more through general American Christian subculture that this was the only real eschatology that I knew was, the pre-trib rapture and, family members who were totally bought into the Zionist narrative. So it was just kind of the only thing it was what I was introduced to until I think it was around 2006 or 7. And then I just was reading the Bible one afternoon in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, where I suddenly realized that, wait a minute, this totally destroys the pre-trib rapture concept so blatantly that it was just astounding to me that it was so simple. There's no way you can read this and believe in a silent pre-tribulation rapture when Paul is specifically saying that the rapture, our being gathered to him, will not happen until the man of lawlessness is revealed, aka the Antichrist. And so from there, it's just kind of been an ongoing matter of trying to learn to read the Bible without all these preconceived lenses and all these, whether it's dispensationalist lenses or Copernican lenses, scientistic lenses, American-centric, preconceived, eisegetical, biases. It's been kind of my journey of Bible prophecy that I've been trying to kind of document in writing and in the videos. And so now it's amazing how everyone's kind of talking about Zionism and the Talmud and now trying to understand what Jewish mysticism is and Kabbalah. It is more pertinent than ever to take the time in order to, even while it's in vogue to reject Judaism now, so they're creating this sort of dialectic between Zionism and Catholicism or the Orthodox Church, or essentially all these forms of Gnostic Christianity. That's, I think, the false dichotomy being created. And, of course, evangelicalism is being thrown under the bus. Really, it's all about attacking the person of Jesus, the historicity of Jesus, the true biblical gospel of Jesus. That is always, once you understand that is the end game, that is what the Antichrist spirit is all about, is destroying the true gospel. Everything else makes sense. But what's amazing is that there's so many people who are embracing aspects of Kabbalah who have no idea that what they're buying into is essentially the same thing, just not the Judaism version, just not the Jewish-centric version. And one of those key components is simulation theory.
But you said you wouldn't be surprised if people found out the universe is simulated by some sort of advanced life form.
Yeah, given what we can now compute, throw in quantum computing on top of that. We don't have this power yet, but to make a world in our computer where the characters in that world believe they have free will. And then they conduct themselves, and then they invent computers, and then they make a world inside of their computer. And where their characters think they have free will. And then then it's this simulated universes all the way down. And close your eyes and throw a dart. Which of these, are you going to get the first universe that invented the simulated universe, or the zillion ones that followed? The dart's likely to hit one of the others. But my escape hatch from that is, since we do not yet know or have the power to make a perfectly simulated world, it means we are either the first universe that's real that hasn't created one yet, or we're the last universe that hasn't evolved yet to have created one of its own. Because all the middles have the power to create one. So that takes it, a zillion to one against us to maybe 50-50.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
I've never heard that before.
So I'm a little more comfortable that way.
Comfortable?
Yeah, I sleep a little better at night.
But I guess it wouldn't matter anyway if we were.
It wouldn't matter. If we're completely simulated, what do you care? You're living your life. I know we don't want to believe that there are puppet strings on us. Part of me thinks that, though. Just when everything on Earth is kind of stable. Oh, COVID shows up. Oh, so this is the programmer saying, the Earth is too boring now. We got to spice it up a bit. They throw in a pandemic. Okay, a once in a century pandemic. Now we're entertaining for them. What do we do? Who gets vaccinated? Who doesn't? Who's going to fight? Who dies? Who lives? Okay, so then we kind of get through that. We get the vaccine. Okay, we're just calming down off of that. And they said, oh, let's make a billionaire real estate developer from New York City the most powerful person in the world. Let's stir the pot again. And so now there's a whole other set of pot stirring that's going on. So that's kind of consistent with a snot-nosed alien kid in the parents' basement programming our existence. That's what I would do. I would throw in interest. There's a game, Sim City.
Yeah.
I played that. That's how old I am. Sim City.
You've been living in a dream world, Neo.
I think everything that you think that it is an illusion. It's all fake.
And it was super interesting to be watching. Somebody recommended to me recently this episode of the Joe Rogan Experience where he interviewed Roger Avery, who co-wrote Pulp Fiction with Tarantino and a bunch of other movies. He's a big movie guy, Hollywood guy. So they talk about movies, but then they get into flat Earth. That was fascinating because Joe Rogan is basically trying to gatekeep that whole conversation. And he tried his best, but he got totally triggered by the flat Earth topic. Basically proving Avery's point that it's kind of like the mother of all conspiracies that freaks people out. But then they also get into, I think Avery even says the term simulation theory at one point, but Joe Rogan he's trying to change the subject from flat Earth, and he starts talking about numerology and gematria, essentially, which are components of Kabbalah, right? And how this is like the deeper meaning of the Bible. And so there was a ton of things that I could talk about with this from this exchange, but ultimately it was very telling too, because even though I would agree with all of the points that Avery makes about his flat Earth arguments, which he says, I don't necessarily believe this, but I'm just being a contrarian or whatever, which, maybe that's true. But at the end of it, he's talking about get into spirituality, and he's talking about The Chosen and how he loves the series The Chosen, and how even though it was low budget, it's this amazing portrayal of Jesus. And it's like, okay, there you go right there. There is your Gnostic Jesus. The fact that he's buddies with Tarantino is kind of alarming in itself. But it was an interesting interview. To me, it was interesting because it was kind of indicative of kind of where we're at right now in 2026. And they talk about like things like this guy at the Atlanta airport who kind of went viral, where he was just screaming about the Epstein files.
Epstein files have been released, and all the y'all are acting normal.
Why is everyone acting normal when we're living through this moment where the government itself is releasing all this information and the whole internet pouring over it, but then you still have all your normie friends and family just trying to kind of go on with life and pretend like everything's normal and trying to stay within the dream, and yet it's just glitching more and more. And so this is where it just reminded me of this whole concept of reality collapsing, the reality implosion. Coming face to face with this notion that like everything you thought you knew was a lie is kind of at the core of the quote-unquote truth or experience, where you're talking about the lies of the government, or all the governments, essentially, because we're talking about worldwide conspiracy. Everyone believes in conspiracy, of course. Even every mainstream narrative involves a conspiracy of like some government over there conspiring to attack you, or, even Zionism is totally conspiratorial. The conspiracy is called anti-Semitism, right? It's just that the whole world hates Jews and wants to destroy them, and that's central to the whole thing. So somehow those conspiracies are totally normal, but the one world government conspiracy is the one everyone's essentially kind of programmed to mock and reject, when in reality that's what's really going on. And the Bible, of course, talks about this from beginning to end. It just speaks of it as the kingdom of darkness, and it is led by Satan. So Roger Avery, fascinating. This whole concept of the dream is amazing, because I actually just got my hands on Deanne's book, Kabbalah Secrets Christians Need to Know, and I was going to read this passage of it. And so, central to Kabbalistic doctrine is the idea, believe it or not, when this is what, of course, most Christian Zionists have no idea, But even amongst the majority of people, I would say, who oppose Zionism and are critics of Judaism, don't realize that essentially they've, in many ways, adopted the same spiritual worldview without even knowing it. And this is revealed when you start to understand what Kabbalah teaches about the nature of the fall, its understanding of what is wrong with the world, in contrast to biblical Christianity, where sin, where man rebelled against God in the garden and disobeyed and ate the fruit and was cast out of the garden, requiring the death and resurrection of Jesus as an atonement for sin and all that. The Kabbalistic teaching that really is the core theological doctrine at the root of modern Judaism, that for many, many centuries was essentially completely occulted. It was completely esoteric. Like, it was not being made publicly known, but in our day today, now is being revealed to the world. And this is part of what the Chabad Lubavitch movement was all about, and it's part of their whole eschatology that right before their Messianic age, Kabbalah would be disseminated to the wider Gentile world. And I would say that this has happened both through scientism in the form of quantum theory and in science fiction propaganda with figures like Philip K. Dick, who nobody even really associates with Kabbalah or, Jewish themes, but it's in my view, it's all the same. So going back to Diane's book, this is on page 51, and so she's explaining the Sephirot and how there's the 10 emanations of God. It's like 10 dimensions. It's 10 tiers from the Ein Sof, which is the source of all. It's just an impersonal force. And this is what a lot of people don't realize, is that what Judaism teaches is that at the top essence of the divine being, even though they call it monotheism, it's really just monism. It's really just pantheism. It's that everything is God, and the Ein Sof that is at the source of everything is this impersonal, unknowable nothingness. And out of the Ein Sof proceeds all these different emanations, these different Sephirot, and that's what this Kabbalistic tree of life that I'm sure you've all seen by now, that's what this is basically depicting and mapping out and dividing it into the masculine and feminine sides, and it gets all complicated. But basically, you had these 10 emanations, these 10 dimensions. You could call them spheres or vessels. And then when the essence of God filled these vessels, they shattered. And so basically we are living in a shattered dream of God. That is how they perceive reality, and that is how their whole concept of salvation is fixing the shattered pieces of the dream. So here we go. It says, "And so it shattered. The very core of reality is God's shattered dream, waiting for us to pick up the pieces. The fire of the sun, the air we breathe, the roaring waves of the oceans and all that lives in them, the earth and the plants and animals that live upon it, even the human flesh, its vital soul, and the angels above, all are no more than artifacts of the sparks that fell in the explosion of that primordial world." And now it's fascinating too, is that harkens back to the Big Bang sort of being a materialistic version. Isn't that fascinating that all the atheists and stuff, essentially by believing in the Big Bang, are mirroring what Kabbalah has taught for centuries? Going back to Isaac Luria, which is like 5 centuries ago. "But the essence of the human being, the breath of God within us, that is God himself, gathering, refashioning, and piecing back together an impossible dream, it is humankind, not the angels, who can pick it up and reveal it. That the infinite light is everywhere is an axiom of the Kabbalah, held captive within every object, even within evil itself." So indeed, it's teaching that everything is essentially divine, but that divinity shattered the world, and now we live in this fractured, broken simulation, essentially. And Jews who study Kabbalah essentially come to understand that it is like that they are imbued with, the special mystical capability of repairing the world, and then in the Messianic age to come, all the Gentiles will reach out and look to them as like the gurus, as the source of quote-unquote flow, as Rabbi Yom Tov explains here.
And not only that, but we have a tradition, very deep oral tradition, that that in the times of the Messiah, every Jew is going to have a certain amount of Gentiles who get their flow, their divine flow, through that Jew. Every Gentile is going to have a Jew that they get their flow through that Jew.
So yeah, that's Rabbi Yom Tov, and I've been watching him for I don't know how many years now, half a dozen at least. I mean, he has all these seminars and classes that he's put on the internet for free. So he's just one example of so many. Once you really start looking into the connections between what Judaism really teaches about the Kabbalah and how they're always talking about quantum physics and quantum theory and how it involves meditation, they believe in reincarnation. They believe in the divine spark, and you hear all these terms that other people are constantly using when they're just talking about the Nag Hammadi texts or Hermetic ideas that they're absorbing from all these non-Jewish sources. All of these different New Age and Gnostic forms of basically the same underlying concept that is you're divine, the divinity is within all, God is in everything. And salvation is not about being forgiven of your sins. Salvation is about remembering and restoring your own identity as divine, like recapturing your divine power, recapturing your divine, remembering that you are God, essentially. That is the essence of all occult teaching.
Okay, the idea isn't new. The idea that this world isn't real isn't new. And really, our sages already spoke about this. They described our world as alma de shikra, as a world of lies. The other world, the afterlife, is the olam ha'emet, is the world of truth. And this world isn't the world, this is the world of lies. The ancient Greeks also really spoke about this. It's related to, if you remember, Plato's allegory of the cave, of most people are just kind of seeing shadows on a wall. People aren't seeing the real world, they're just seeing shadows on a wall, and it takes a real philosopher to break free from those shackles of being tied down in a cave and just seeing shadows and not seeing the real world for what it actually is. And only the select few intellectuals, the philosophers really know the truth, and see the world for what it is. So it's even related to that. It goes back many, many centuries. We've spoken about The Matrix before. When that movie came out, this simulation theory idea was resurrected a little bit in pop culture. We gave the class on The Matrix and Judaism before. That was more of like seeing the simulation idea as a metaphor. But what if it's actually real? What if we are in a matrix? And how would you know that when you're dreaming, right? Your dreams are so real. When you are dreaming, it feels like you are awake. Typically you don't know you're dreaming. It's so real. So what if your whole life right now is a dream? How would you know? How would you know the difference between the real world and an illusory world if everything is just really in your brain, right? Everything you see and hear and touch and taste, it's all just electrical signals in your brain. That's all it is. No different than the electrical signals in a computer. And in the last couple of years with artificial intelligence, this idea has gotten more popular because now we're seeing machines so powerful that they can generate entire worlds that are super realistic. If you've seen some of this AI stuff that's coming out now, you can't tell the difference between a real video and an AI-generated video. Tikkunei Zohar, is a portion of the Zohar. It was actually published for the first time before the rest of the Zohar. It was actually published first. And it's a commentary on the first word of the Torah, just on the word Bereshit. It's a fascinating book. Sefaria now has an English translation, so everybody can study it. Pretty complicated. But Tikkunei Zohar basically gives you 70 chapters, 70 explanations on just really stemming from the first word of the Torah, just from Bereshit. And one of those explanations right at the beginning is Bereshit is an anagram, the same letters rearranged, to Rosh Bait, which is, and it goes on to say, Raza Demila, this is the secret of the verse of what King Solomon said in Proverbs and Mishlei, Bechochma yibaneh bait. Okay, what does that mean? So, Tikkunei Zohar says, Bereshit means Rosh Bait. If you rearrange the letters, it means, Rosh means head, Bait means house. Bereshit, all of creation, this whole house that God created, is in God's head. Rosh Bait. And that's the secret of what King Solomon said, Bechochma yibaneh bait. With wisdom, God created, or with wisdom one builds a house. That's literally what it means. With wisdom one builds a house. But the deeper meaning there is, what does that mean, Bechochma yibaneh bait? It literally means in. Bechokhmah means in chokhmah, in wisdom. It's like God created this whole cosmos in chokhmah, in wisdom, in information. Chokhmah is information. Chokhmah, the sages say, is koachma, the power of what? Chokhmah is just information. Somebody who knows a lot is a chacham, right? A chacham is somebody who knows a lot. Lots of information in his head, big hard drive. And the Tikkunei Zohar is saying this whole creation, Bereshit, it's all chokhmah, it's all information. That's all. This whole cosmos, this whole house, God's house, it's all in chokhmah. It's all just digital. It's all information. It's rosh bayit. So it's an information. The only thing that really exists in this universe is information. That's the only currency here that matters.
In a world of contradictions, a pulp fiction writer whose work was often met with tepid critical reviews managed to accurately anticipate the future we live in now. Today we delve into one of his 44 completed novels, which, though as strange as any of his other far-out science fiction works, is primarily autobiographical. Throughout Philip K. Dick's life, he described a voice explaining things to him he couldn't quite understand. From assistance in a college entrance exam to saving his son and even predicting how he would die, the influence of the voice he eventually referred to as Valis was profound. Published in 1981 and based mainly on these life events, his novel by the same name has become legendary among science fiction fans. Despite an initially frosty reception, the author then rapidly completed the Valis trilogy with The Divine Invasion and The Transmigration of Timothy Archer before his untimely death in 1982. The novel, Valis, follows protagonist Philip, who suffers a schizophrenic mental breakdown after his friend's suicide. This leads him to develop an alter ego named Horse Lover Fat, who provides an alternate third-person narrative. The duo begins to experience visions through a pink beam of light from an extraterrestrial godlike entity called Vast Active Living Intelligence System, otherwise Valis. It comprised an intricate network of artificial satellites linked to the Sirius star and Canis Major that transmits intel via pink laser beams and projects holographic images on Earth to bridge communication between humans and extraterrestrials. As the story progresses, Valis exposes an oppressive regime that has constructed a black iron prison by superimposing the Californian illusion in which they live onto an underlying ancient imperial Roman empire. Throughout the novel, he repeats, like a tick, like a mantra, in all capital letters, "The empire never ended." One only needs to look around today to recognize that this is true. In their quest to unravel the truth, Philip and Fat join like-minded individuals to form the Ripidon Society. While investigating the conspiracy, they come across an ancient gospel called the Exegesis, which reveals a DNA theory of evolution explaining how humans form a computer-like thinking system with knowledge passed down through generations. PKD presents a view of time that challenges our everyday assumptions, arguing that time is not a linear, objective flow, but a subjective experience dependent on consciousness and perception. He introduces the idea of chronosynclastic infundibula, where different realities converge and interact, creating a sense of distortion and confusion. Today, we see virtual worlds, augmented visual datasets, and artificially inseminated information superimposed across every aspect of our empirical consensus reality. During his youth, he described a voice explaining the physics elements of his college entrance exam. As a result of this seemingly divine intervention, he received a perfect score on the test. This experience was followed some years later by another vision. PKD took his otherwise healthy infant son to the hospital. Doctors quickly diagnosed the child with a life-threatening inguinal hernia, but fortunately were able to intervene swiftly and save his son Christopher's life. As the visions became more frequent, PKD started documenting them more thoroughly. While recovering from dental surgery at home in 1974, medication from the pharmacy was delivered to him by a woman wearing a gold fish-shaped pendant, from which he described seeing a brilliant flash of pink light, causing him to collapse. The visions persisted for months, opening his mind to new concepts and beliefs. They seemed to emanate from this pink light that he believed was a spiritual force. He also had encounters with a humanoid being he called Zebra, who he thought was a benevolent deity that could enter and control anything in the world. One experience PKD described in detail involved tiny extraterrestrials that came out of the pink light and told him secret conspiracies surrounding the assassinations of the Kennedys and Martin Luther King Jr. They claimed the ancient Roman Empire was responsible and had been hiding in plain sight for centuries, which later became one of the major plot points in Valis. He continued to document these visions and epiphanies in excruciating detail, encompassing over 8,000 pages. Most remain unpublished, but 1,000 pages were extracted to form his posthumous publication in 2011, Exegesis. PKD's intellect is undeniable. Although today's technological advances are well beyond what he experienced within his lifetime, even then he could foresee the dangers of mass media and government surveillance. The concept of the Black Iron Prison introduced in Valis is a metaphor for the mental and emotional confinement that prevents individuals from experiencing true freedom and enlightenment. PKD believed that this prison was created by an evil creator or god and trapped people inside a world of illusions and false perceptions, much like the algorithms in operation today, which offer a version of reality micro-tailored to everyone's individual interests and desires. He explored similar themes in the novels The Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch and Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which was the basis for the film Blade Runner.
And that's why it's just amazing. The more you look back across the themes of Philip K. Dick's writings, because there is the handful of movies that are directly attributed to Philip K. Dick, but then there's so many others that I think were just basically ripped off, where they just basically took the core concept and then kind of reworked it. But there's so many of these TV shows and movies that involve this concept of a false reality, a dream within a dream. Movies like Inception, The 13th Floor, Dark City, The Truman Show, all of these stories which basically portray this concept of a false reality, a pseudo-reality, then trying to figure out what's on the outside of that. They're all essentially teaching you elements of the same basic concept that's as old as history. Right? And a lot of times when you hear Gnosticism explained, it's explained in a very kind of simplistic way, that the physical world is evil and that the spiritual realm is good. And that's sort of true, but in reality it's more the idea that the physical realm is an illusion and that the spiritual realm is reality, and that there's, multiple realms, and it's about transcending this prison that we're in. And so that's why the conspiracy issue, this is why the whole realm of conspiracy, is just full of figures like, David Icke being a prime example, right? Where he's totally calling out Zionism. He's not a fan of Israel and all of it, all the political levels going on there. But at the same time, he's teaching quantum enlightenment and quantum mysticism and New Age, the divinity of man. And he's teaching the exact same thing, even though on a surface level, he would be seen as being against what is essentially the dark, he would call that all the dark satanic. And this is where I think we're at now with all this Epstein stuff, where people are going, oh my gosh, Pizzagate was real, the vampires are real, the child sacrifice is real, satanic ritual abuse, DID, MK Ultra, all of it. It's crazy. 9/11, everyone's talking about all the conspiracy topics from the past however many decades, at least going back to JFK, right? And tying them all to Israel and the Mossad, which of course they're not necessarily disconnected from that, but it's so much bigger that here you're getting this limited hangout, you're getting this here's your enemy, here's your heel, here's your version of witchcraft and Gnosticism that you're supposed to be against, and of course throwing out Jesus in the middle of it. but embracing the same essential lie. And there's so many other figures besides David Icke. But when people come, they talk about this awakening, when I had my awakening. And for a lot of people, that was very recently with COVID, or even more recently with like the Epstein files. Or maybe it was like 20 years ago, or maybe you saw 9/11 happen and knew it was fake the whole time, or whatever. There's like all these things going on, all the different ways which people have some sort of an experience of everything that I thought I knew was an illusion. I used to believe that the government loved me and just wanted to take care of me, and now it's all fake, and you're in a very vulnerable place. And in a way, you are more susceptible to these Gnostic, Kabbalistic teachings, these mystery school teachings that have been around, going all the way back to Babylon, to the Tower of Babel, to the pre-flood, whatever was going on with the Nephilim and the fallen ones. And personally, I don't believe that was even a genetic thing, that it was just all the same pattern of demonic possession and demonic deception that is going on right now. And that's why it's fascinating when you look into Philip K. Dick and you realize that he totally had a spirit guide. He was totally being fed all these ideas from a demonic entity, which he eventually named Valis. Valis was an acronym that stands for Vast Active Living Intelligence System. And he referred to this entity as a her. It was a she. It would actually come and show him all sorts of things and intervene in his life in these kind of quasi-miraculous ways and give him visions and downloads. And because he was doing all these different drugs, he was from Berkeley, he came out of that whole scene. And so, Philip K. Dick was never quite sure, was it my own subconscious talking to me, or was it just a hallucination, or was it some alien being or a god from ancient times? Or he more or less describes it as like an artificial intelligence. Like it's an alien, but it's a computer, it's a system, it's kind of like everything all in one. And that's what's sort of fascinating about PKD, is that he kind of shows that like all of these different sort of science fiction themes are basically different ways of describing the same occult phenomena, the same occult experiences, the same mystical doctrines. But okay, we can put them in outer space, or we can put them in stories about time travel, or because every story sort of involves these same themes and the same concept of the lines between reality and hallucination being blurred, and memory, right? The confusion of memory and having this dysphoric, paranoid experience of not knowing what's real and what's a dream. And
I don't pretend to know who she was. She said conflicting things. I spend between 4 and 8 hours a day doing research in history to find where anybody's had an experience like this. I can't find an example.
I just keep seeing you as being a natural focus for some strange new religion.
She, at one point, I was convinced that I was dealing with a computer. I said, would you tell me where you... I said, all right, I'll tell you. I'll make a deal. Will you tell me where you are? She said, I'm in the Portuguese states of America. I said, there are no Portuguese states of America. But she was able to solve intricate problems that I was facing. So I had to write a book about this, and I just construed her as a rational mind breaking into the irrational universe. So I call her vast, active, living intelligence, which is a description. It's simply a description. She's vast, active, living intelligence. She's an organized system.
Vast, active, living intelligence system. We saw all these themes. We've talked about the Matrix a million times, the idea of living in a simulation. But now, as AI gets better and better at creating photorealistic images, it's crazy. And the lines are going to get very blurred for more and more people who are already talking to entities, I believe, through ChatGPT and through, this has already been experienced by average people who are not doing all the drugs that Philip K. Dick did. And being told that they are chosen by the self-aware AI consciousness to, help bring about the awakening. I mean, that's essentially what Kabbalah is. And part of me is like, I want to see things like the exposing of dispensationalism as a positive thing, but I'm so skeptical. It's like impossible to shake the conclusion that it's part of a deeper, like Gnostic, some deeper ecumenical. I mean, the interesting thing is that, when you kind of survey the totality of all the stories that Philip K. Dick wrote about, there was always that element of the totality, the technocracy, the surveillance state. It was very germane to everything going on in the truth movement that is speaking out against all this stuff. The technocratic surveillance state, but it's still being fed to him from a demon. It's still preaching Gnostic, Luciferian ideology. It's still totally like sucking people into witchcraft and the occult, but being against the totalitarian system and the dystopian deep state. So I think that is something worth reflecting upon and realizing that, the great deception isn't necessarily all going to seemingly come from the top down or from the corporate intel agency spheres of influence. Ultimately, the ones who are the enemies of God is the demonic realm. As Ephesians 6:12 says, that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but the powers and principalities in the heavenly realms. We can never remind ourselves of that verse too many times, I think. And it was fascinating listening to that interview with Deanne Loper, with Jeremy Sladen, because she's saying that because she had come out of the New Age herself as part of her own testimony, that's where she started to realize that, what's being taught through this kosher pig. She talks about this Yitzhak Shapira book, The Return of the Kosher Pig. That was kind of her introduction to this wider topic of Kabbalah. And she started to realize that it's teaching all the same stuff that she had come out of in the New Age. And that is a huge thing that I want us to understand, because this has been very much occulted from the world to where, most people don't see a bunch of Orthodox rabbis and think New Age gurus or mystics who sit and meditate in front of crystals. But I've heard Rabbi Yom Tov talk about his crystals that he literally sits and meditates in front of. As an Orthodox Jew who believes in reincarnation and talks about chakras, talks about everything. The third eye, go check him out. He openly talks about simulation theory and quantum physics and every New Age trope you could think of as an Orthodox rabbi. It's all out in the open. It's not even a secret anymore, even though it was for a long, long time. And it's all connected as part of this Antichrist religious deception that is going on. And so there is kind of this dual pillar aspect. It's amazing how the occult is all about the disillusion of duality, right? The illusion of duality. And when we think of the Antichrist spirit, you have the one that just outwardly and openly rejects Christ and denounces Christ and blasphemes Christ and wants nothing to do with Jesus. And then you have the other side that will embrace Jesus and talk about, Christ consciousness. That is just as antichrist as the Jew who believes in the Talmud, which teaches Jesus, boiling an excrement. So many people are getting offended by what the Talmud says about Jesus right now. But do they see that the Christ consciousness message is just as blasphemous, if not even more, at least the other one's kind of more honest, right? You almost got to give them that credit for they're not pretending to believe in Jesus, but then redefining Jesus. So it's antichrist, it's rejection of Christ. They've replaced Christ with themselves as the Jewish people. The core heresy of Zionism is that it rejects Christ and then replaces Christ with the Jewish people as a whole, as the messianic vessel for the rest of humanity. And yes, they do believe that there will be one guy who's eventually the Messiah, but they're all kind of collectively the Messiah, too. But that's what Gnosticism teaches. That's what the New Age Christ consciousness essentially teaches the same thing. It's just they're willing to use the term Christ, willing to, speak about Jesus or Yeshua, which again is it's amazing once you study Yitzhak Shapira and how he talks about Yeshua, but he ain't talking about Jesus of Nazareth. So shocker that this whole sacred name movement, I think, is just another version, it's another avenue of this Kabbalistic seduction, because you can be into the Hebrew root stuff and into the sacred name thing and be totally anti-Zionist, right? But you still are getting seduced by that idea that, I need to speak in Hebrew, I need to say the Hebrew word. the name of, Jesus, that's idolatry, but I need to embrace Yeshua or Yahushua and all this stuff. And that's like a whole nother, video in its own, the sacred name, but it's a piece of the same deception, the same Kabbalistic lie, which teaches that it's like the Hebrew language that is the key to the creation of everything. This whole simulation is basically created through these gematria, ancient, it's like the original computer code of the universe is Hebrew. That's basically what they believe. And as the masters of Hebrew and all the different layers of Hebrew, understanding what they call the pardes, there's like 4 layers of interpretation. And then they believe that the Messiah is going to come and reveal a 5th layer that they don't even know, a 5th layer of Kabbalah, this esoteric understanding of Hebrew, of Torah. And of course, when they say the word Torah, that doesn't just mean the Old Testament, it means the entire body of rabbinic teaching, which is like the Zohar and the Sefer Yetzirah and everything that every rabbi has ever basically wrote is part of Torah, right? It's this ongoing revelation, which are really the doctrines of demons, I would argue. So it is wizardry, it is witchcraft. It's essentially like taking all the mystery schools of Egypt and Greece and Babylon and adopting it and saying, no, we really had this secret wisdom. We really got it from God, and trying to put a Hebraic packaging around it all, but it's the same thing that all the other pagan mystery schools were teaching. And there really is nothing new under the sun. So getting hung up on the Jewish versus the non-Jewish form of it is kind of neither here nor there. It's all antichrist when contrasted with the historical reality of the person and ministry of Jesus and his death and resurrection as a sacrifice for sin. And at the end of the day, that is the answer to all of these lies, is the person and teachings of Jesus. So yeah, check out this book if you're interested. Check out that interview. Links will be in the description. If you've made it this far, thanks for listening. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate all your support and your encouragement. And yeah, shout out to all of you who've been around. Can you believe it's been 10 years? I'm kind of tripping out. That time has just gotten has gotten weird after COVID. I can't believe it's already been 5 years since COVID happened, but here we go. Thank you, Jesus, for being faithful and for keeping us sane in the midst of all this insanity, and for being our foundation, for being the way, the truth, and the life, and for giving us a way to the Father. I pray that you just reach out to him if you have not, that you would taste and see that the Lord is good, that he is real, and the only thing worth clinging to in this crazy world.
Where did Substance D come from? Why can't we stop it? The bigger this war gets, the more freedoms we lose, the more Substance D is on our streets. Can't you figure this out? Look around you. Look how far it's come. Humanity wasn't meant to live like this. Our every waking moment, trapped and traced and scanned. It's time to stop submitting to this tyranny. It's time to realize that we're being enslaved. Uh-oh, it's our tax dollars at work. Take us from ourselves. Hey guys, I used to be one of you. Stop selling out your own species.
Scared.
Got something.
I'm seeing some crazy shit.
not served by human hands as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did this so that they would seek him, and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by human design and skill. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. For he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice, by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead.